that all men have inalienable rights to think freely, to talk freely, to write freely their own opinions, and to counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others.
This is from the Creed of the Church of Scientology. Hey everybody, I'm Holly, aka the ScientoloGeek, and welcome to the 45th episode of Going Over the Data series. Now, today we're going to be starting a multi-parter called Evaluation the Situation. That's Data Series 41RA. It might take up around 3 to 4 videos worth of time, so it's going to be a bit to lug through, but we'll get through it. We always do. And if we're going to move on, we have to do this. If you want access to any of these documents, including the flag orders, base orders, volumes of the tech or the policies, any of the miscellaneous materials, I just added the PTSSP course from this binder here, How to Confront and Shatter Suppression. I just added that to my courses folder in my Google Drive. So if you want access to that, feel free to email me at scientologeek@gmail.com. Use a valid Gmail address, and same thing if you decide to hit me up in Discord. You can go to the link, which is down in the description, along with the email, and then DM me from there. Again, valid Gmail address. Without further ado, let's get started. All right, let's start the HCO policy letter of the 15th of March, 1977, RA. Revised the 5th of November, 1990. Data Series 41RA. Evaluation the Situation. Extracted from an LRH talk to staff aides on 2 January 72.
There are bad situations, good situations, and no situations. A situation is something that applies to survival, and if you evaluate the word situation against survival, you've got it. A good situation is a high level of survival. A bad situation is a threatened survival, and a no situation is something that won't affect survival. We've gone ahead of the whole show of intelligence with the data series.
This data series feels like it's made my IQ drop.
Note, we're using intelligence as an example solely and only because it's the most inclusive system man has developed for collection and evaluation of data.
It's called data analysis. Why are you using the term intelligence?
We've greatly extended and refined this system. Espionage and other intelligence activities and skills have no part in our application. We're using intelligence as an example of data usage systems, that's all. You're out into an area of greater simplification and far more use. This doesn't necessarily make anyone an intelligence officer, but a general or a head of something or a general manager or an executive who does not know how to evaluate a situation will make nothing but mistakes. The mistakes of history are made by people who cannot evaluate, by which we mean determine the situation, which even more simplified would be find out the situation. From this given body of data, from that indicator, we can find a good situation, or a bad situation, or a no situation. And this is what one is trying to determine. The more skilled one becomes in doing this, the less work it is. It's a matter of skill. To give you an idea, if you tried to play every note of a concerto separately by having to look up each note in the chord book and then strike it on the piano, you wouldn't have much of a tune, right? The longer you did that, the more likely you were to begin to approximate some sort of something that sounds like music, but it would take a lot of practice. Now, you can get so all fired good at evaluation that you can take an isolated indicator and know immediately where it fits into because you know it fits into the plan of things and because you know it is or isn't part of an ideal scene. It's better than the existing scene or it's too far from an ideal scene. You can pick up an indicator in this way, and it sometimes probably looks magical to you how I will suddenly pick up an isolated instance, look down the line, and we find a roaring hot situation at the other end of it.
Now, the only reason you can find this stuff is because it's your technology and you're the only one who knows how to use it. Or you're just making stuff up. Or you're just finding a situation that probably isn't really a situation.
Now that's done out of an economy of data. It's done because one has not the time to investigate or read all the data which might exist on this particular subject being investigated. Someone learns to do something that looks absolutely intuitive, and when you're terrifically hot at this, it's called flair. Prediction from data is an essential part of evaluation. This datum is an outpoint. It shouldn't be. Peculiar. Now it'll predict more data. You have to be so hot that you'll notice something is an outpoint. It's a wild outpoint of some kind or another, except its magnitude, size of datum. How important is this datum? The evaluation of importance is one of the more difficult things people do. They have a tendency to consider things of monotone importance. You have to train yourself out of that. What do we get here then as a qualification for an evaluator? You have to know all the outpoints in sight. You have to know what outpoints are. But that's rather thinking backwards, because you should know that something shouldn't be. And as soon as you get a shouldn't be, you can do a prediction. And that leads you into an investigation by viewing other data. In other words, you find this terrific outpoint, or these outpoints, and you find out where they exist. It leads you into, very directly, the point that you should be investigating. Definition of evaluation. This is as close as the dictionary comes to the definition of evaluation. To examine and judge concerning the worth, quality, significance, amount, degree, or condition of. Now to edit that down, it's to examine and judge the significance and condition of. An evaluation, the act or result of evaluating, judgment, appraisal, rating, interpretation. And an evaluator is one that evaluates. An intelligence officer is supposed to be a professional evaluator. This word is a technical word which isn't given in these dictionaries. It's an action which is basically an intelligence action. The actual meaning which is supposed to be embraced in the word is to examine the evidence in order to determine the situation. That's the intelligence meaning. And then it could have a further, so as to formulate policy or planning relating thereto.
You're redefining words only to fit your group.
In other words, what's the enemy going to do? So the general can say, therefore we should blank. What is evaluation? Here's an example of what evaluation is, the type of thing expected of an evaluator. I was looking at an org's graphs, and all of a sudden I see a drift down of reserves and a level of bills. The bills are level, 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 drift down of reserves until all of a sudden it's about to cross, and this was an org where we just changed the commanding officer. So I say, hey, whoa, wait a minute. This organization's spending more than its income, obviously, by the looks of this graph, so let's look into this just a bit further. I looked further and got more data, and I found out that the org was running insolvent. The Data Bureau already had a report on this. I picked it up on another line. I just picked it up off graphs. Further investigation found out that the new CO had taken over from the old CO and had inherited an extremely backlogged org, including backlogged bills.
Just like, Johannesburg, I think, when they had their electricity bill cut off. Their electricity cut off because they had a high electricity bill.
And the new CO had been sent in there on a set of garrison mission orders, and they just contained standard COing actions when they should have been MOs designed to handle the insolvency scene, forcing the org to promote and make income, then making an announcement that no POs will be signed except promotion, wages, and utilities, then getting the dateline paying and forcing accounts to dig it up out of all of their mouse holes and get all those bills that have been in there for a year or two and the stuff they didn't file and get a dateline paying system in. And then you start surveying like mad to find out what the organization can sell, and then you start delivering, beef up on your delivery lines, and so on. It wasn't any surprise to me to learn that the graph was a false report, of course, but this is no explanation. It doesn't mean the situation doesn't exist. The situation does exist, but the graph is a false report. That's a hellish outpoint all in itself. It's actually backed up by other data, but you could have taken it this way. You could have seen the graph declining. That is, reserves going down, bills staying the same, then you find out it's a false report. At that moment, by data series, you charge in and investigate the heck out of it. There's an indicator. Then another indicator that's a false report. Where did I count out points? I was counting them all the time. One is enough. A declining reserves graph and a holding debts graph. Well, that was enough. So the counting was 1. As I looked a little further, I got 2. And as I looked a little further, I got a 3, and a 4, and a 5, and a 6.
Are you going to tell me what those outpoints were, or are you just going to make up outpoints?
We did a handling and more outpoints showed up. Right as you're handling the thing, more and more outpoints will show up, so there's a point where you neglect any more outpoints. You can go on as a lifetime profession finding outpoints in one of these areas. It's enough. We've actually done something with the data series which has never before been done.
Yes, made it stupid.
Other data evaluation systems have to do with the reliability of the observer, which determines if the reported fact is a proper datum. But all of their work is done on computers.
Yeah, and what's the problem with that?
And those computers are built against logic systems developed by the Greeks. But it is data, validity of which monitors logic. A black propaganda operation is almost totally concerned with feeding wrong data into the population, and therefore the population cannot come to correct conclusions and their actions will be peculiar. There are experts in black propaganda, and they're fully trained in it, and they do it all the time. Back of wrong data, you'll normally find an impure intent. So that somebody's giving you false reports is an evaluation in itself. An evaluation first requires data. The absence of data you should have would give you an evaluation. We knew something was wrong with an area because all of a sudden somebody found out that they weren't sending in their reports. The absence of data is an adequate evaluation that there's something wrong, and in one such case, it actually took weeks to find out what's wrong. If you find the out point, you're into evaluating a situation. You're just looking at data. You find an out point, you investigate that. You find more out points, you go along and say, it's the thing that we're looking at now. What the heck? Because you're obviously traveling away from the ideal scene, or you found something that went much closer to the ideal scene, or something that didn't change it. You then look it over and say, it's this point. And at that moment, you can figure out why this is occurring. Now, why is this occurring? And that requires a bit of data. Why is this occurring? Therefore, when you can say why, now you can handle. What you want is the out point, and an out point is a departure from the ideal scene. That tells you that there's an area to investigate, and you can investigate it simply by going and finding more data and more out points. And then as your data accumulates, you can get why it's a departure. The accuracy of your why then gives you the point, which you'll have to handle, which is all very neat, and there comes in your recommendation. This is the trick on evaluation. You have to learn what's an out point, what is this outrageous thing, and then that cones you down. Now you could find all kinds of little points.
All right, we're going to hold off at review.